Hi, very good afternoon, it's Jim from Avstar. I wanted to share with you how this observatory came about and what it is that we are doing here on YouTube and with the website. It's going to go on probably for about 20 minutes. I hope that you have got the patience to stay with me because it's an interesting story. I'm sure you'll and the point of this is to just explain to people, the work that's gone in over the last 12 years. But the story doesn't start 12 years ago, it starts a lot longer ago than that. When I was at secondary school, I'm about 14 years old, the only subjects which I really thrived on was physics, chemistry, biology and science. It should come as no surprise that my qualification now, my main qualification, is natural sciences, because that covers pretty much those subjects as well as maths and astronomy. So that's the background of the qualifications that we've got here, and why it led to me in 2000 studying, or just I think it was 1999, studying at university for that qualification that I received in 2002, 2003. So that's the background in the qualifications and the interest in science. But that wasn't what led us to start searching for more information on the geomagnetic pole reversal. What started that was around about 2000, and I'm pretty sure that those that are of the age remember the YK2 bug that everyone was worried about. Apparently that when the computer clocks hit 20,000 or 2000, that there was a big fear that a lot of the computers wouldn't be able to cope with the exchange of the date, and therefore it caused a lot of computers to crash, and therefore screwing up everything that was reliant on computers at that time. It didn't happen. But I also had another interest, and that was in the ancient civilizations like the Egyptians and the Mayans, and also the ones that were before that. Off the top of my head, I can't think what they were, but I know they was in the Iraq area, and they were the first civilization to have writing. Goes back probably around 10,000 years. The ones that believed in the Anunnaki, and if you read that tablet that was found in Iraq, it's quite surprising to think that their god was actually more closely related to a foreign entity from another world, another planet, that had came down from the heavens and taught them their ways. So what I was very focused on at that point was the Mayan date 2012, and we'll never know to this day what they really was talking about with regards to the 2012 date, because on the stoneworks that record that date there was a piece missing, which was probably the key to what the date meant. But what I have found, that in a lot of religions there's been specific numbers talked about, like 144. I think 144 in the Mayan calendar is one Bactun, and we also have that in the King James Bible. Now 2012, just like YK2, came and went and nothing happened. And I started to think then, well, what is it that the human species should be concerned about? And I started looking and searching, and found that the only anomaly that really is taking place, and that was recorded to be taking place, was the magnetic North Pole. So from around 2012 to the current date, that's where all the research has been focused on. And of course, around 6 years ago, some of you that have been with me that long will remember that, I said that we would try and find a company that could supply us with the equipment to track the magnetic North Pole. And I very quickly realised that, we weren't even talking tens of thousands. We was talking, over £100,000 to build such a piece of equipment, or buy it, or pay somebody, to build it for us, which meant that it was completely out of reach. And I said, because I'd got a very basic knowledge in electronics, that, I would have a go at building it ourselves. And, although the components of the Trimag system are cheap, and that's, I'll admit that they are, but what wasn't cheap and what wasn't easy to come by was the program that manages the components. Magnetometers can do a variety of things. Like, our magnetometer, or the magnetosphere equipment that we've got that measures the intensity, uses a magnetometer that focuses not on the direction but on the intensity. So we've had to manipulate the program in order for it to give us the intensity of the region which it's placed in. And the reason why we was interested in that is because we had magnetometers in Australia, Hong Kong at one point, and in Kentucky. That was the first ones that we had out, and we was focusing on the intensity that was mainly focused around Canada, and Kentucky was the closest we could get at that point in time, and we was focusing on the intensity over the southern region, which is the South Pole, which is leaving the peninsula of Antarctica. And that was as close as we could get it, having one in Australia there to measure that intensity, because we know that these intensities are changing. Canada is decreasing, and that intensity which is creeping off the peninsula now in the Antarctic is more measurable in Australia at the moment than anywhere else, and we know that that is moving up towards the equatorial region. So I set about around 6 years ago now programming it. The problem is that I had very little knowledge in programming, so I had to buy books to learn how to program these breakout boards that run the magnetometers. And the system that I'd set up was using 3 magnetometers that was fed back to a master wirelessly and recorded on an SD card, and that's where all the big problems we had run into, all that time that was spent over 2 years programming. Now, just to give you an idea of how hard it was, we managed to get the 3 magnetometers, the 3 separate magnetometers that was run by 3 breakout boards, using NFR24 transmitters and receivers. We managed to get them to communicate with the master, but the master had a breakout board itself which ran an NFR24 and also an SD card writer. So the big problem was the limitation of the breakout boards that we had. The memory was very small, and therefore the program that we had originally designed was too much for the breakout board. So we'd ran out of the space in which we could write a program because it was taking up too much room. And one of our subscribers in Kentucky had a son that was working at Langley at the time, and his job was to program the screens on board the what looks like a private jet, but actually was spying at the time on the Spratly Islands. So a very capable programmer who was very familiar with the breakout boards that we got, and C++, which is the language that they use to program them. And he very kindly donated his time. I'm not going to mention his name. He very kindly donated a lot of his time to try and resolve the problem of the master writing the information onto the SD card, because the master was already receiving packets of data from 3 Trimags that was being transmitted by an NFR transmitter and being received at the master by a receiver, and then that information, which was date time stamped and it got all the important information on, like the heading, had to be recorded onto the SD card, so that when we got the SD card out over a period of time, we could put all that information into Excel and get a chart. And he said, "I'm sorry, Gene." He says, "I really don't know what the problem is." He says, he'd looked over the program, modified a few things that he thought that would be a problem, and in the end he said, I can't spend no more time on this because I don't think it's going to work. And after spending already a good 18 months on this, probably a little bit longer, I thought that was the end. We were not going to be able to bring on our own equipment online to monitor the position of the magnetic North Pole. So I didn't give up, and trust me, it was one of the hardest things I ever learned was programming. And I didn't give up, and about a month after that of trying, and every time I turned on the computer and went back to that program to try and resolve little things here and there, it made me physically ill, because doing something that you don't like doing but having to force yourself to do it is a real difficult task, and that's what I had to do. And then after, like I say, a couple of months, we had a big breakthrough. We actually got the SD card writing the data that was being received by the receiver, and then compiled by the breakout board, and then writ onto the SD card. And the receiver was receiving all 3 packets. That at that point, then all we had to do was calibrate the magnetometers to each of them to read the same, or as very, very fractionally close as possible, and then switch it on, and then just wait. We done a test for a couple of days, and we received, because the master was receiving a packet of data every 3 seconds. You can imagine over a couple of days how many packets of data we'd got, and then we processed it. And if you go onto the website today, poleshiftnews.com, and go down at the very bottom of the Trimag data, you'll see the very first tests that we did, and then we ran it for a week, and then we got good results, and then we ran it for a whole month and got good results. And that's what we did from that point on with the Trimag system. So when I say it would cost probably over £100,000 for you to obtain something that could track the magnetic North Pole, I'm not joking. It isn't the cost of the equipment or the components, it's the cost in writing the program. And that's what we have, something that nobody else has now in this world. They will not have the exact same program that works in the same manner that we have. So we have something that nobody else has, and the Mavstar Observatory was at that point then born. We then modified the program to run the magnetosphere units, which measures the intensity of the region at which they're placed. So as soon as you switch the magnetometer on, it starts to record the intensity and not the position of the North Pole. So we then had not only a Trimag system, we had a magnetometer, or an magnetosphere intensity piece of equipment that monitored the intensities of where the magnetometers was. And then because we'd got a certain foundation by now of writing programs, we applied it to the atmospheric oxygen sensor. The reason why we brought the oxygen sensors online was because people were concerned that with all the car combustion engines and all the fossil fuel burning, that we was also burning up more oxygen than what was in the atmosphere, and so we brought that online. So today we have magnetometers, the Trimag system, we have atmospheric oxygen sensors. All of those we designed from scratch and built ourselves. Then we came across a guy, Alexei at MIT, who had built a muon detector, who had freely put all the data you would need on a website that you could download. All you'd have to do was buy the components to assemble it, and he also provided the instructions to assemble and the parts list, and also a method of diagnosing faults. So we then copied that, we put it back to the subscribers of the channel. We said if we could raise the money, we would get the PCB boards printed up, and that's exactly what we did. We got the PCB boards printed up, and we started to build the muon detectors and send those out as well into the field. The other thing that we've got here is a CO2 detector, which we brought because it was easier to buy it than it was to build it for us. So today at the observatory we have magnetosphere equipment that monitors the intensity of the region of where they're placed. We have muon detectors. We have TriMag system that is bespoke, nobody else has because of the programming. They might have the components, but they won't have the program that will run it. And trust me, people have asked if I'd give them a copy of the program. After 2 years of work, they just said, could we have a copy? And I don't think people understand, how difficult it is. So that's very precious to us, that piece of code. And we also have CO2 equipment as well as oxygen. And the reason why we have CO2, now this is a big thing, is because the companies like, or organisations should I say, like the United Nations are raising from the countries that make up the United Nations $1 trillion a year. Think about that. Where do the countries get the money originally to start with? Well, it comes from the taxpayers, obviously, because governments don't manufacture nothing, and they don't sell nothing, and they don't make profit in any way. It's actually collected revenues. So it's you guys that are paying for the CO2 nonsense right now. And how would you know whether CO2 was rising or falling? Yourselves, without buying a CO2 monitor, something that measures atmospheric CO2. How would you know what they were saying was the truth? And that has been the principle of this observatory from day one. If we use the scientific method and actually have equipment that record, then we can say, if an organisation comes out and says, oh, the CO2 is at 420 parts per million, we can say whether that's true or not, because we have CO2 equipment. If an organisation says that the magnetic North Pole is at such a latitude and longitude, we can cross-reference that here. Just like if an organisation says that the oxygen is depleting in the atmosphere, we can check on that. With all the equipment that we've got for a small observatory, we can verify quite a lot of things. Now, on the website, we've also got pages that covers other things like the Schumann frequency, which is an interest of a lot of people. The Schumann frequency is made up on the counts of lightning strikes, which is about 7.8 hertz, which means that every second there's about 7.8 lightning strikes around the world. Now, people say if it was to stop, that it would affect us. And I heard that on the manned mission to Moon, that they had actually put something in the shuttle that was going to the Moon that was a recording of the Schumann frequency, just in case that these astronauts, wouldn't be able to live without being in that vicinity of the Schumann frequency. And I don't know how true that is, but I thought it was worth mentioning anyhow. So, we are here today. An observatory has been born on the back of the interest of the collective subscribers that we got, which is about 50,000 58,500 I think we're at today. Yeah, somewhere around that. We've got 195 people supporting us on Patreon. But, we do have, like I say, 58,500 people subscribe to us. And we know, here at the Observatory, that you've got as many that watch a video in the last video. So, we've probably got a couple of thousand people that regularly follow us. And the point of all this is, guys, the reason why I wanted to talk about the Observatory being born and the background behind it and the interest that I had in all this and how I ended up coming into this field of interest is because how do we know when these organisations tell us something to be true? How can we cross-reference that ourselves without no equipment? And the thing is that we just can't. So that they can tell us that CO2 is at whatever figure, how many parts per million they want. But unless one of us has got the equipment to verify it, we won't know whether that's true or not. And that is a big thing, because trust has been lost. Public trust around the world has been lost by governments, because especially today when we look at mainstream media on how it reports on the stories, and a good example is what has gone on in Gaza with Israel, and the shocking level of what I could only describe as murder, and it is supported by the United Nations and other countries around the world, not only supported with money but also supported with arms. And then when we compare what's going on with Israel and Gaza to what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, the world governments condemn it, when to me there is not a lot of difference between the two. And I would rather, in my personal view, live in a world where none of this was taking place. I would love everybody today around the world to understand something about the Earth which they live in, which is taking place now. I'm talking about the major anomaly that we talk about, the magnetic North Pole. I would love more people to understand, within a little bit of depth, what is going on with that. And equally, I would like people to understand that what they're doing in raising these funds and changing industry with regards to man-made CO2 will achieve nothing other than wax people rich in the industries of green policies across the range. I'm not surprised that public trust is at such a low level. And, to reinforce that, just look at how now they are even prepared to stamp over what is called democracy and freedom of speech. Because at the heart of any democracy, there is a freedom to share your thoughts and your ideas with whoever you like. Yet, on the back of COVID, we saw them, kicking people off YouTube, putting these banners on the bottom of videos, with their propaganda, especially when you talk about climate change. You're going to get one of those banners which directs you to the propaganda that, it is human beings that have caused it through the burning of fossil fuels. When you look at the real data, and you'll find that 99% of CO2 that's put into the atmosphere is actually put there by natural occurrences from degassing of oceans and land, and that less than 1% is what is man-made CO2, the burning of fossil fuels. So this world that we've lived in, as for many years before humans was there, was always emitting CO2 through degassing of land and oceans. The natural degassing, that is. So, that little or less than 1% that they say that we put in there is the tipping scale in their argument. If we weren't putting that less than 1% of CO2 into the atmosphere, then we wouldn't be suffering global warming, what they call. And I think that you know, as well as I do, that if something is a trace, it is a small amount of something, and CO2 literally is a trace. And that's why, on Earth Alpha at a glance, we look at that. Now, we do go to a few other companies for other bits of data on the Earth Alpha at a glance. We use USGS, and we know that they downgrade, the magnitude of earthquakes. So, but the thing is, we don't have seismographs that measure the magnitude in the regions all around the world. And if we did, we would definitely use our own data instead of collecting their data. But what we do know by using USGS is that they can't hide the fact that there's been an earthquake in a region, but what they can do is hide the actual magnitude of it. So we have to, just accept what we can, have. But just knowing where these earthquakes are happening is better than nothing. I think you'll agree. So we, put up, when we do the Earth Alpha glance, the latest in the last 24 hours of looking at the data, we put up the biggest magnitude and the region of where it was took place. The other thing that we monitor is the eruption, the volcanoes that are in eruption. And again, that's information from another company. But one thing they can't deny, again, just like they can't deny earthquakes, is that the volcano is erupting. So we know for that reason it's true, because it's verifiable. Someone in the regions of where these volcanoes are in eruption and there's lava coming out of them can say, yeah, that is the case. And if they said that a volcano was erupting and it wasn't, then I'm sure there'd be a lot of people saying, what are you talking about? So we can verify those things. Those are the things that we can verify. With earthquakes, we can't verify the magnitude of them. We have to take the word value of USGS. But we do know that they've happened or taken place in that region because it's verifiable. And when there are severe magnitude of earthquakes, well, it does reach mainstream media, and we can see the devastation caused by that. But why we collect all this data for you guys is so that you can go quickly to Earth Alpha at a glance and get information on a list of things that you're interested in. If you're interested in volcanic eruptions that are taking place and the number of those volcanoes around the world, it's there. If you're interested in the latest earthquake within the last 24 hours of us uploading Earth Alpha at a glance, it's there. And twice a month now we do the TriMag system. We use the TriMag system to pinpoint the latest position of the magnetic pole over the northern hemisphere. And because we lost so much revenue through various things, the world going into a economic downturn and the cost of living crisis taking place, we lost a lot of people that simply couldn't afford to support us like there was. And we had to move the TriMag system just to favour those people that was prepared to regularly support us, and that's why we moved it over to Patreon. But I've always said, if we could get back the revenue that we was earning prior October 2023, we would rapidly return it back to YouTube for everybody, because I want everybody to know where the position is of the magnetic North Pole and how it's progressing and on how fast it's moving over the northern hemisphere. Because when we start to see it accelerate, and although we already have seen a slight acceleration, when we start to see that accelerate meaningfully, we know that we're going to start to see more climatic effects on a more severe scale, and people need to be aware of that. So we really want to bring it back. But the reason why I done this video for you guys was just to give you some understanding of the difficulty of bringing you the information and the reason why we had our own equipment. And I hope that in this video you have a little bit more understanding, and maybe, I don't know, maybe it might encourage you to support the effort. More than anything else, it might encourage you to support the effort, because we've not given up. We've been at this now for over a decade, and we did it for you guys. I mean, I know that it's not an ideal thing for you to go out and build your own Trimag system. I wouldn't recommend it for anyone. Give it a go if you really want to, but if you start at the same point I started at, know that it's not going to be an easy task. You might be ringing the bell well before you finish, because you might realise, like I didn't at the time, that you might be out your depth. The reason why we brought the CO2 machines is so that we know that it wasn't practical for everyone to buy them. The reason why we built the oxygen sensor is to satisfy people that were concerned about the oxygen in the atmosphere. The muon detector was to measure the radiation, because we knew that when the magnetosphere weakens, you have more muons on the ground surface. And the magnetometers that measure the intensity in the region, well, we know that the intensity is shifting from Canada to Russia. Canada's getting weaker, Russia's getting stronger, and therefore it's dragging the magnetic North Pole over towards Russia. You could do this experiment with a couple of magnets in your compass. You'd see that what I'm telling you is absolutely right. And also, last but not least, there has been ongoing background research into low-cost energy production. So there's been a lot of research gone into that, and I have every idea that's come out about zero point and perpetual motion. I've replicated it. I have got several models remaining still. The other ones I threw away because there was just a big joke. I'm talking V-gate magnetic motors or magnetic generators. I've done them all, trust me, and none of them work. The best one I've come across is the hydrogen fuel cell. I like it. It's pretty amazing how it works. I've tried putting different gases in there. It just doesn't work with different gases. It has to be hydrogen. And if we can crack a couple of things in that industry, one is storing hydrogen, and two is creating oxygen. And the best way, or the most common way, is using electrolysis. And the cheapest way of doing that is by using solar panels to create electrolysis. In turn, we get hydrogen. And then the problem is when we get the hydrogen, because it's such a very small, cheeky little atomic particle, it can fit through the tiny gaps of the storage tanks. So you always get leak of hydrogen gas, no matter what. And that's one of the fields of research that they're trying to improve, as well as the improvement of the production of hydrogen using electrolysis. So that's pretty much our story here at the observatory. And like I say, we're going to continue on, because the polls haven't reversed yet, and the governments haven't stopped lying to people around the world about CO2, altering our climate. And we will continue to show people the truth about how the climate change has come about, because I think you'll agree with me, and you'll have noticed yourself, that the weather just simply isn't the same as what it was 20 years ago. The weather is very unpredictable today, in that you might have a t-shirt on the afternoon 1 minute, and then have to put a jumper on in the next. And that is down to the direction of travel of the jet streams, whether it's polar or subtropical, northern and southern hemispheres, both the same story. And on that point, if you've made it to this far, I want to thank you for your time listening to the story of the Mavstar Observatory and the work that's been going on, and that will continue to go on. And the only other thing, if you are in a position to take a little bit of time out, maybe you would consider chucking in a few bucks to support what we do. The only other thing for me to say is you continue to look after your loved ones, because we do live in great times of change, that's clear. And I will say what I usually do at this point. Bye for now.